you are celebrating 10 years at the Museum of Idaho. Congratulations.
Thank you.
My first question for you is, when you started at MOI 10 years ago, did you expect to still be here today? And has anything surprised you along the way?
I guess I couldn't say whether I expected to still be here. I think I was really excited to start this position because I had been in sort of the field of education, and I was in just sort of formal education, teaching in a classroom. And I had some experience teaching informally in the museum setting before. And so I knew I would like it. I guess I didn't really realize how much I would like it. It became apparent very quickly after I started that I would want to be here for a long time. And so I'm not surprised to still be here, but if you would have asked me before I started, I don't know if I would have said yes.
For sure. That makes sense. So you've been here for 10 years. What are some of your earliest and most vivid memories being at MOI?
Oh, well, gosh, I feel like it took me a little while to open all the doors, but when I got my set of keys and then sort of started to explore what was around, that I think was some of my most fun and vivid memories. It's just like opening a door and finding another basement. We've got like 3 different basements that aren't attached to each other, and that was fun. And when I first started too, there was our big mammoth was hiding behind this wall, and being able to go back behind, like squish in between this wall and look at the mammoth was so fun.
That's awesome.
I loved that. And I don't know, I've got so many. I have loved all of my different coworkers that I've been able to, work alongside, and just seeing people succeed and be really cool at what they do and get to learn from them has also been super fun. I've got a million different memories like that too.
That's awesome. So can you recall a moment, if any, during your time here where you kind of shifted the way you thought about museums or felt about museums, or how you approached like education in the museum?
Yeah, as a kid, my family always took me to museums. And so I sort of knew what I was getting into from the very beginning before I ever had my first museum job, in a different place than this. But I would say that it really has, my thinking and the way I approach things has evolved. I can be kind of a perfectionist sometimes, and I still have that going on. So sometimes it takes me longer to do things than it should. But I would say that, I've found good processes to be able to, repeat things or kind of understand what will work in our setting.
Yeah.
And so I would say that has applied really well into like exhibits work. I've really loved to learn because I never went to school for that kind of work, but I get to be on a team of people that work on exhibits. And that has been super fun, and learning sort of like what I think works here, and also what looks good when it's presented in a certain way in the galleries has been fun. And same applies to programming, being able to understand, what kind of programming different age groups are looking for and what will work here in the museum. Does that answer?
That totally makes sense. Yeah. And so I guess I kind of asked you 2 questions there. So you were talking about like the educational approach and kind of how multifaceted it is here, because we do so much in terms of educating. Is there any way that was there any moment where you shifted the way you viewed museums? Like, maybe you had a certain preconception of a museum before you started working in one? Or
Yeah. So I think that a good realization for me has just been how far-reaching a museum's impact can be.
Yeah.
Like when I initially took this position, I was thinking, oh man, like what kinds of programs can I facilitate in the museum based on the exhibits that are here? And over the years, it's really grown into like, what kind of programs can we facilitate like throughout our community? It doesn't have to be within the 4 walls of the museum. And so exploring sort of what value museums bring in a broader sense to a community has been kind of eye-opening for me, because I think when I was initially thinking about it, like I said, I just was really I was pretty drilled down on the exhibit aspect of it, as opposed to just the general, educational ability and all of the ways that we can bring collections or just our knowledge of the community, or the fact that we are, a reputable source for science education. All those things have woven into different programming at the museum.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. No, that's great. So you have launched a lot of different projects and taken a lot on in your past 10 years here. what's one project that you pushed that felt like it maybe was a gamble but ended up being a big win in the end, if anything?
Yeah, I think there are actually several examples of things like that. I think laser tag is a good example of something that was a risk but a big win. So I had been working on the Museum of Dark programs for a long time, and then during one of our summer kids programs, a previous colleague of mine was planning this camp for kids, and it was all about sort of like game strategy and different things that you could learn from playing games that would apply to like lots of regular things in your life. And she found a company that offered like mobile laser tag. And after we did that, I was like, oh man, that was so cool. I bet we could do that in the museum when the galleries are empty and people would really enjoy it. We could weave in, information about the history of laser tag, but also like the science of lasers and how they work. And people have really loved that program. It's been super cool. And I think most recently too, I think that the Kiefer's Island tours were a little bit of a gamble as well. I felt pretty confident that people would love that and be successful just because from my own experience, it's something I always wanted to do, be able to go out to the island and look at the cabin and learn about the Kiefer family. But it definitely was sort of a gamble to be like, okay, we're going to, work with a couple of different organizations to make sure that we can actually get people across the water and, try to sell a bunch of tickets so that we can sustain the program too, so that people who want to do it in the future are still going to be able to. And also we can, support the staff that are supposed to be there and telling those stories. But I also think that one went really well too.
Yeah, that one, sold out last year and we're doing it again this year. Stay tuned for that. But anything else that you wanted to add in that regard?
I guess what I'd say is that I am so grateful for how willing this institution has been to take risks, because I think that obviously we're all under this umbrella of our mission for what our nonprofit is supposed to be, and also our vision for how we want to implement that in our community. But there have been a lot of times where especially coming from the formal education world, you would look at something and be like, oh, well, the fun idea, but like we can't do that. And the number of times where someone in this place has said like, no, let's not try that, we can't do that, is very few and far between, and for good reason whenever it's come up. But I think that sort of like risk-taking ability that we have here has paid off in a lot of big ways. Like there's just been a lot of value, I think, that is added to this community because people have been willing to take risks and then put in the hard work to make them pay off. Yeah,
no, that's awesome. Cool. So my next question for you is, how has working at the Museum of Idaho shaped you personally or professionally, or both, over the past decade?
Oh.
It's kind of a broad, very broad question.
Well, I think perhaps this is my own sort of I probably need the therapist to talk to about this, but I think that the museum has like really become a part of my personal identity, maybe too much, because I love it so much. Like I said, I knew I would like it, but coming here, it has just been so fulfilling to be able to see like the things that you get to share with people actually make an impact on their lives, and like actually have an effect on, people wanting to live in this community or wanting to travel to this community. And it's also super fulfilling to just see, the risky ideas come to fruition, and just try things and learn new things all the time. It's I think sort of part of who I am as a person is, before I started working here, is I love learning. I think it's really fun to learn new things in a lot of different subject matter areas, and the museum has just provided that for me in spades. Like I am never bored. I'm always getting to learn something new. I'm always getting to like feel like I get to be a part of something special and feel like I am making an impact. And so like I said, it's very profoundly impacted me
Yes.
personally. I would say that professionally as well, it's definitely impacted me. I started here as the director of education, which was a big job for somebody who was sort of recently out of college, had just spent a little bit of time in a classroom. But it has, my career here has grown over these past 10 years to, taking on this role of managing director now, which has a little bit more responsibility for other departments beyond the education department, and has allowed me to play a leadership role here at the museum too. And so the ways that this museum and directors here, I've worked for 3 different directors here at the museum, and each of them have really allowed me to progress my professional career here in different ways. And so I'm super grateful for that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in your eyes, so you've done a lot at the museum in the past 10 years to make the museum more than just like, a building with artifacts. You've created, you've really like helped implement programs such as Museum After Dark, the Haunted History Tours, lots of kids programs, summer camps, stuff like that. And so what makes a museum experience truly memorable and not just educational, in your opinion? You've seen a lot of the impact that not only the museum has had, but you've directly had, your team has directly had on people experiencing the museum. And so what do you think is something that really makes it like extra special for people?
Yeah. I think it's connection with other people. So whether it's connecting with the people that you came with, and being prompted to have a conversation or learn something new or try something new with that group of people that you came with, or whether it's having a connection with a volunteer at the museum or a staff member, that I think makes a big impact. I always for a long time, my office was downstairs, sort of near where the Eagle Rock exhibit was. And so I got to take the opportunity. I would hear people walk through that exhibit a lot and say like, oh, this is my favorite part of the museum. And before we transitioned and created this Way Out West exhibit, which has now these interactive pads down there where you can learn a little bit more about what you're seeing, I would hear people say, this is my favorite part, but they would sort of walk through kind of quickly because there wasn't a lot to like to explore further than just feeling immersed in that space. And so I would take the opportunity, like I stashed sort of like the stick candy in my office that you can see in Anderson Brothers, and I would take the opportunity if I would hear like a kid out there who's excited, like look at the candy, then I would like bring one of those stick candies
That's
out
awesome.
And talk to them a little bit about what they were seeing. And so in my I'm hoping that one of those kids who, ended up with some candy from me or whatever, felt like they got that experience. Because I would then always, say like, oh, well, my favorite shop is the dentist office. And let me tell you why. And talk about some of the artifacts that were there. And we can still do that, even though we have all that additional interpretation. And I feel like that enriches the museum experience for the visitor. But it also is like very lovely for me to get to have that experience as a staff member, feeling like somebody's got an interesting question that I've never heard before that I, can try to answer for them, or just feeling like, you helped somebody to understand something.
So you've probably seen most of the exhibits that have come to the Museum of Idaho since you're a local from here. Which one would you say has been one of your like all-time favorites? It doesn't have to be while you're working here, but.
Yes, I am very lucky to have been able to grow up here. And so the number of exhibits that I actually didn't see, in terms of our traveling exhibit history is probably, I could count on one hand. And I think there's lots of different exhibits that I've loved for different reasons. There's like some of them have surprised me because I didn't think that I would be particularly interested in them. Like the very first exhibit that I ever, when I started working here, was called CSI, Crime Scene Insects. And it was all about how insects can sort of help scientists who are understanding a crime or understanding a death to like collect more data about that process and how that history has dated way further back than what we think of as modern day forensics today. And like just from the outside, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that I would be interested in that,
Mhm.
but it was so cool. It was really fun to learn about that. Same thing with this exhibit that was all about pirates. Like I didn't know how much I would get out of that, and there was a lot of complex, history of humanity that wove into that. There was all
Mhm.
sorts of stuff about the slave trade and all sorts of stuff about, what's it sort of like meant for society to have these these people roaming the seas,
Yeah.
and whether it was sanctioned or not, because sometimes it was. So like I said, it's really hard to choose one, but because so many stick out in my mind. But I guess if I had to land on one, the one that I will is actually one that we curated for our traveling exhibit hall, and it was called America's Revolution: Rebels with a Cause.
Yep.
And I loved that exhibit because I got to really understand what it meant to be sort of a museum professional working in a museum. You got to sort of see the start, all the way from the start of a project to the end of a project, and see the impact that it could make on school kids, and all the way up to people who were really well versed in the American Revolution. And so I guess that one stands out for me.
Awesome. Cool. I didn't know that. So I wouldn't have guessed that either. So that's really cool to know. So what's something you haven't done yet at the museum but want to do?
Ooh.
So it could be a project, it could be bringing in an exhibit, it could be anything.
Oh man, that's good. Well, I have some sort of big crazy dreams about things that I think could work really well at the museum, whether that means like facilities expansion or exhibits that I'd like to see. But one of the things that has sort of been on my mind for a long time is I would really like to eventually write a children's book about the women of Idaho Falls. So there's women's history has long been sort of like a passion of mine, and there is just an incredible group of women in Idaho Falls past that I didn't know much about until I started working at the museum. And it made such an impact on me to learn about these people and see what they, did for Idaho and they did for the nation at large. And being able to tie those things together is just so cool. And I have a daughter of my own who is just 8 years old, and I want her to grow up sort of like hearing the stories of the people who made a big impact on the place that she's from. And so I would love to see that come to fruition one day, is, like working with a really cool female illustrator to bring the story to life, and just sort of highlighting some of those different incredible women in a context that is would make a big impact on kids.
Yeah, that would be lovely. We got to make that happen.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So this is kind of, I wouldn't say in the same vein, but my last question for you is, what gets you the most excited when you think about the museum's future, like where we are headed?
I think it's hard to answer too, because there's a lot of different things that make me really excited about where we could go in the future. I think this is going to sound maybe a little bit silly, but I think what makes me the most excited is seeing the different people who are a part of this place now. There's been people who have come and gone from the museum, and they've all added such like wonderful, interesting, dynamic things to this institution. And I just feel like the group of people that we have here now are so talented and so passionate about what we're offering to the community, that I think it's very cool and relieving in a way for me to feel like, I have a ton of ideas that I would love to see implemented, but I have all these other incredible people who also have a ton of ideas that they would like to see implemented. And so feeling like, that passion runs through the entire staff, and cool things are just gonna get implemented because we've got cool people who want to do them is amazing. It's really, really exciting for me to think that lots of good things are going to get done, and I don't have to do all of them personally. Lots of other people will.
Oh, that's really lovely.
You know, thank you for all you've done for the museum. It's very apparent how passionate you are and how much of your life and talents and skill that you've put into this place. So seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And I know a lot of, we all feel the same way. So
thanks, Camille. That's
congrats and happy 10-year anniversary.